Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mike Loves Fanfic Content. Actually, this is called Love Me Twice, Save Me Thrice. I have no time for introductions right now because this is gonna be I'm shaking, I'm very, very shaking. So I'm gonna have to do this as quick as possible. But this next chapter, chapter 9, there's like 11 parts. But that last part is gonna be very chunk, so we'll have to save that for another video, and that would wrap up the chapter 9 for you. Okay. He doesn't trust Prince Lotor. He doesn't trust the Winter Court. He doesn't want to belong in there. But he brings up a rather enticing deal. What's gonna be his deal? When the kid doesn't think he can refuse, and he has to decide. He has to bide his time and hope he survives. Hopefully, he makes his own decision. Luckily, the winter blood runs through his veins and has some people on his side. So, oof, this is very exciting. So, let's get down to this. I have no time for this, so let's go. Chapter 9, Never Harm Them. So, do we have a deal? The Crown Prince of the Winter Court is all teeth. Perfect, pristine, straight and white. His canines are sharp, and Kate is fairly certain he has more teeth than is human, and he's certain of this strictly because Lotor has not stopped smiling since they sat down to listen to his grand plan. It's unnerving. He makes his skin crawl, combined with those sharp eyes that give nothing away. He knows Lotor isn't lying. He's incapable of it, yet it all seems too good to be true. Still, Keith can't seem to parse through his words to find any subtext of deceit. As intense as his eyes burn, they give away none of his thoughts. In fact, the only thing Keith can pick up with certainty is fury, a rage, and excitement, barely concealed anticipation and fervor. And as much as he hates to admit it, he finds the offer interesting. I do not like this, Lance says, voice still in hush. Sure, Lothar can hear, but his words are meant for Keith. Keith offers a little more than a low grunt, something acknowledging but distant, distracted, thoughtful as his eyes never leave Lothar, sitting across from them, so relaxed and so sure. They're in one of the small, dead-end spaces in the hedge maze outside the Winter Palace, a little corner locked away from the rest, a bubble of perceived privacy. With statues and flowers to decorate the haven, two small benches facing one another. Lothar sits at one, prim and proper. Lance and Keith sit on the other, one stiff and one brooding. Keith sits at the edge of the bench, leaned forward with his elbows resting on his knees, hands clenched and raised, fingers frown hidden behind them as he stares at the prince through narrowed eyes. His blood burns, ripping like a living thing in his veins, itching at his forearm and prickling beneath his palm, dagger practically begging to be released. Still, he holds it in check. He lets himself think. Beside him, Lance sits stiffly, back straight and chin raised, glaring down the length of his nose at the Fae across from them. His arms are crossed over his chest, hiding his clenched fists. He's still, too still. Had they been alone, he is sure he would see Lance fidgeting, a knee bouncing, fingers working restlessly, expression twisted sourly. But as it stands, they're not alone. They're at a court. They're meeting with the Winter Prince, and as such, Lance's mask has slotted back into place, cold and confident, coy and smug, even in his obvious displeasure. A perfect statue. Too perfect. It betrays his unease. Or perhaps Keith simply knows him well enough to see it. Keith, Lance breath heavily, a low whisper. More insistent this time, sharper, as if he knows what Keith's silence means. Perhaps he does. I do not like this. I know. Keith mutters, lips against his interlaced fingers. He cracks his knuckles absently, trying to relieve the pent-up itch of the dagger, eager to press through his palm. This is not a good idea. I know. Suddenly, there's a hand closing around his arm, and he's pulled to his feet as Lance ends. Excuse us. We would like a moment to discuss this in private, Lance says, all sharp courtesy and a too-wide smile. Lothar looks unfazed, wavering off. Of course. Lance drags him out of the small little bottle of privacy, through the decorated archway, down the long hall of the hedge maze, taking a corner, only stopping when they seem out of earshot. He rounds on Keith, arms crossed over his chest, mask cracking as his brows furrow with worry, lips pressing into a frown in anger, eyes echoing fear. He steps into Keith's space, nearly touching, hissing into the breath of space between them. You're thinking about. It's not a question. It doesn't need to be. Keith sighs, body aflame but retaining its tension. His mirrors Lance stands, arms crossed over his chest, both of them close up and stubborn, but standing close enough that their arms press together. It's a comfort despite it all. Keith, Lance is more urgent. Lean forward to press his forehead to Keith's. You can feel the worry lines forming. You can't. I can, he says slowly, testing it on his tongue. It won't be easy. It's too dangerous. Right now, my whole life is dangerous. He reaches forward, cradling Lance's neck in his hands, thumbs brushing along his jaw. He leans back, brows pinched and lips pursed as he looks Lance over. His beautiful, breathtaking Lance, perfect and pristine in this world of magic. He may be the summer court, but he looks at home here, backdrop by the crystalline winterscape. Lance's hands come up to rest over his own, clinging tightly. We can still run, he whispers, edging on desperate, pleading. We still get you away from here. Lance, we'll find a safe place to you. We'll find a safe place for you to be. We'll find a way to protect you. Lance! Lance's mouth snapshot, frowned deep as his eyes flicker between Keith's. Even if we do get away, it won't be over. It'll never be over as long as I have the Knight's Mantle. And the only thing that can remove that is death, or a member of the royal family. Lance's eyes narrow, sharp and fierce as his lip curls to a mimicry of a snarl. I don't trust him. I don't either, but he can't lie. They lie without the use of their words. You know that better than most. You grew up being warned about this, about making a deal with them. Your father and Shiro, I know. But that was to prevent something like this from happening. But the fact is that I'm here now. I'm wrapped up in it. If I'm doing this, it means I'll be free. That Shiro will be free. I want to try. But Lance's nails bite into Keith's hands before his grip slides down to his wrist, holding on tight as he leans forward. He presses against Keith's forehead, bruising as he twists his head, eyes closing. It's dangerous. Keith's heart aches. His hands slide from Lance's neck, wrapping around his shoulders to pull them flush. Lance's arms find their way around his waist, holding tight as he bursts his face in Keith's neck. Everything is dangerous, he whispers, running fingers through Lance's snow-white hair. Lance's fingers curl into the back of Keith's glamour-crafted clothes. I could lose you. You won't, he says firmly. You can't promise that. I can. It's a lie. Keith finds himself smirking, eyes tense as he stares at a curved crystal flower on the edges that make up the walls around them. Not if I believe it. Lance huffs a wet and weak laugh, breath hot against Keith's neck. Foolish, stubborn, hot-headed. Keith holds him tight. Despite how solid their glamour clothes build between them, he swears he can feel Lance's heartbeat through the sheer material of light's magic. I have to do this, he whispers, for myself and for Shiro. Lance sighs, deflating Keith's arms. I know, he says, defeated and begrudging. I'm not happy about it. Keith presses his smile at the tip of Lance's pointy ear, marveling at the newness of it. I know. You are going to make up to me. Keith chuckles, feeling Lance shiver. I know. A moment's time stretches, lingering and melancholy, comforting and warm the crisp air of perpetual winter. They hold each other, savoring each ticking second, memorizing the feeling of being in each other's arms. No matter how things go, Keith wants to be able to recall this moment in perfect detail. For the press of Lance's chest against his with every breath, so the hands cling to his back, the shape of his nose pressed to his neck. I wish this moment could last forever, and judging from the sigh Lance heaves, he knows Lance does too. When Lance kisses him, one hand pressed to his cheek, it's short and sweet, firm and lingering even as they pull apart. When Lance steps away, he holds Keith at arm's length, eyes roam over him from head to toe, sharp and concerning, as if putting him to memory. This new image of him, this fey version of him that Lance had been so smitten by in a brief moment and had to revel in it. Well? Keith watches as Lance posture shifts. He pulls himself a little taller and straighter, shoulders rolling back and head cocked to the side, as his lips curl at one corner, forming that familiar, lopsided smirk, full of confidence and amusement, as the lines around his face smoothed out, shifting back into that of a porcelain mask, stiff plaster giving nothing away. As his eyes hardened, beautiful blue going cold and still as a frozen pond. Voice controlled, lilted, musical and joyful, but hollow all the same, brimming with a power and authority kept carefully in check. Let's go make a deal with the devil. Well, it kinda sets in with the deal. So this one deal could definitely change up this. So I don't know what the deal is. We have no idea what the deal is. But Keith has to do this for himself and for Shiro and for everybody else. So yeah, Keith took that deal. But again, we have no idea what the deal is going to be. Let's just keep it as a secret. Letting Lance go is hard. Not going him is harder. But following Lotor out of the maze and leaving him behind with that word pinched to his brows and a frown on his lips, that's the hardest. He can still feel Lance's warmth linger on his skin, fading quickly and letting in the bitter sting of frigid air. He pursed his lips, as if trying to shield them from the creeping cold, trying to preserve the tingling warmth for as long as he can. Compare yourself, knight, Lothar says as he leads Keith through the twisting maze. He doesn't pay much attention, merely follows in the prince's wake. That, after all, is something we'll have to get used to in the days to come. Though, keep the scowl. He's thoughtful, bordering on teasing, giving way to an undercut of sharp giddiness at a deal well struck. It makes them worry, and we do want them worry. The only response he gets is a sharp exhale, fleeting on the tail end of the half-formed scoof. Still, he does as he's told, if only because its sound abides, locking away the ache in his chest and burying the trepidation he feels, the worry and dread like ants crawling beneath his skin, the fire anticipation and rage seeping out from the core of his magic, pulsing in waves of his heart. The shadow of beast he has never dared let into the light of day, one made of indignant anger and fury at the things he's had to endure in his lifetime. It's a beast inside him that he fears, but it's a beast he knows he'll have to embrace, and it knows. He feels the sickening delight in his blood, feels the itch at his birthmark. As they exit the maze, Aksha is waiting for them, leaning against the banister back up on the patio that overlooks the gardens. If he's surprised to see Lotor, she doesn't show it. If she's surprised to see him return, she keeps carefully locked away. But as Lotor passes, they exchange slight nods, and she falls into step beside Keith in the prince's wake, hands clasped behind her back and chin held high, expression impassive, eyes almost bored. Lotor steps back into the palace, easily sweeping through the halls and back to the festivities, but Keith pauses, half turns, glances over his shoulder to the ice-dusted hedge maze that stretches out for miles. He can feel his heart break, but he doesn't let the echoes of it touch his face. When he turns back around, Aksha's watching him, lips pressed to a thin line, eyes almost kind as she whispers, "It'll be all worth it." Quiet, but fierce. Filled with a rage Keith feels he knows, but is surprised to find it in her. He lets himself harden, lets his internal chaos settle, like eyes on the pound, like Lance's eyes as he accepted Lothor's deal. "I'll be right." Well, he took the deal and tried to stay calm down, keep it into this just the winter realm, okay? But little do they know, well, what they don't know is that Keith finally loaded up, ready to fire up or something. But okay, that's what we're here for. But let's, again, save all this later. So, as he sails into his bed that night, caged in by the rich walls and looming vaulted ceiling of his casual prison, he can still feel the weight of Lotor's hand in his, the way his lips curled into two wide grin with too many teeth as they struck the deal, as Kate sealed his fate, for better or for worse. He has agreed to kill the Winter Queen. In exchange, Lotor will dissolve the Winter Knight's mantle, as long as Allura agrees to do the same. That's Lance's part of the deal, to bring the deal to her in Lotor's stead. He hopes she accepts, or his decision to stay will have been in vain. Okay, we'll settle down a little bit. So yeah, he's agreed to kill the Winter Queen, so that's whatever. In exchange, and he will dissolve the Winter Knight's mantle, so Keith's mantle, as long as Laura doing the same here on the Shiro's mantle. And then Lance part deal to bring the deal to Allura in Lothar's stead. And King hopes Allura accepts, or that decision will stay the same. So, that's the deal. Let's see how it plays out. It's like we're playing a game here, but it's just like the role-playing stuff. So yeah, follow along, guys. We got a lot of stuff to do. He knows exactly why Lothar had chosen, had bided his time and slot all his game pieces so carefully into place. Why had been so adamant about growing Keith's cover as a changeling? As an Iron Blood, he didn't have to abide by the rules of court or the laws of the mantle he bore. He could kill a Fae without being ordered to, and without being slighted. He could shed royal blood, and as the knight, he was in the position to do so, situated pretty as the royals shining the toy. Still, while he had known that something of this magnitude would take time, and while he knew it wouldn't be easy, he quickly realized just how much he had underestimated the task. The days started to slip by, bringing with them current that sweeps him into routine. He starts to adjust to the flow of it all, to being at the court and what his role entails. He starts to get used to being surrounded by prying, scheming eyes, and the visages of the Winter Fae. And all the while, his blood boils, strung out the tense, nerves fraying, snapping, and sizzling at the ends, despite his efforts to keep himself still and composed. Ticks start to warm their way through his body, seeking to discharge the energy that's constantly built up and coiled tight. The tapping of fingers, incessant pacing, jerking at every little noise. He waits, and he waits, and he waits, ready to go, eager to whip this plan into motion. No matter how fearful he is, and no matter how terrifying the prospect of defying the Winter Queen is, no matter how much it makes his stomach roll with unease at the thought of killing someone, Fae or otherwise, while also feeling fury in him that he struggles to keep leash. But all that adrenaline sours in his veins, curdling with inactivity. It makes him more irritable, frustrated, feels that scowl that he's become known for. He had expected to have to buy his time and wait for the perfect opportunity, but it quickly becomes clear that opportunities are going to be rare things. He nearly never sees the Queen, and what he does see of her are only ever glimpses down long halls, from a distance across the palace courtyards, or during official court gatherings. She's secretive, hidden away, mostly a mystery to those of the court, a shadow and phantom that most fear and barely dare to whisper about. Unlike Lothar, who spends his days amongst people, who's always there, with a confident smirk and a graceful hand, with his head held high, even as he lounges casually across his throne, Keaton knows that people fear him, as is often the way of Fae, but he can also see the respect they have for him. It's a fear that comes from knowing him. The fear of the Queen is from the unknown and the daunting, ever-looming threat of her power hanging over the court, like a ghostly axe made of ice, post to fall. When he asked Aksha where she goes, she merely replied with a vague shrug and a non-committal sound, "I heard she's often with the king," though no one can be sure, as no one is allowed near their living chambers. It's more likely that she's with her disciples, scheming. And so the adrenaline in his veins peters out, and so the beast of vengeance in his gut begrudgingly settles. So it grows more numb in the winter air, falling into patterns and routines, allowing itself to acclimate into this new and foreign land. And so, against everything he's been taught to fear, Keith takes his place among the Fae, a tool, a pawn, a silent threat, shining behind Prince Lothar's throne, and echoing his footsteps and those of his generals in the long halls of the palace. We got a lot of things here. Yep, this is the waiting game for Keith. Let's see how this both fall. It's like he's playing his chess by themselves, but everyone else are playing checkers. Keith plays chess, everyone else plays checkers. Or might be the other way around. I don't know, I don't know anything. "How do you do it?" Keith asks. He sits back in his chair, slouched low, legs spread wide, leaned on an elbow on the armrest. Across the small table sits Aksha, posture relaxed, but far more poised. She hums in question, distracted but alert as her eyes flit across the game board between them. It's a game Keith never heard of, but it's quite popular amongst the Fae, like a far more needlessly complicated form of chess because the Fae love their cunning and strategy. Playing the game had started as a mental exercise, but now it feels more like a simple way to pass the time. He doesn't have free reign of the palace yet, though he's not sure if that's because Lotor is worried or if it's the Queen's paranoia. Either way, they keep their shiny new toy locked away for most of the day. Despite how restless he feels, he is fine with this. The less the court sees him, the less likely they are to figure out his true heritage. Aksha, at least, still visits him. They often spend hours together, sometimes training and sometimes merely passing time. He finds he enjoys her company. She doesn't chatter. She doesn't scheme. She's blunt and straightforward. He trusts her far more than any of the other Fae here, and that is largely due to the fact that Veronica is her lover, which makes it all the more assuming that the entire court is whispering about the budding relationship between them, one of the lords and generals and the new knight. Neither of them truly mind. It helps keep their true pinning a secret. How do you do it? He repeats. Browsering. He's turned away from the game, has truthfully already conceded it to her. He rarely wins anyway. Instead, his eyes are locked on a single blue forget-me-not. He holds the delicate yet surprisingly stiff stem between the finger and his thumb, twisting it slowly, watching the way the dim light catches on the crystalline petals. It's not the first one Aksha has brought him. She meets with Veronica far more frequently than he had thought, and nearly every time, Veronica passes Aksha a boon from lands to give to him. Just to give him hope, just to keep him going, just to tell him that Lance is thinking of him. This is the fifth forget-me-not Keith has received since he's been here. The other four are hidden beneath his pillow. It is about strategy. Keith hops ashore, sharply. Not that, I mean Veronica, the distance, the two courts. How do you do it? Aksha looks at him then. Quirking a brow and narrowing her eyes, Keith meets her gaze sidelong. It's not easy. Another soft scoop, a dry and withered. Obviously. But this is why I follow Lotor. She looks back to the game board, sharp eyes flickering from piece to piece, lips pursed in, lines form around her eyes. I am not purely of the winter court, she emits softly. Words clip and short. My mother was half-breed, summer and winter. My father was of winter. I passed this court scrutiny, but only just. All of us, Lotus generals, have mixed blood, just like him. We believe in the peace he's trying to sow. She reaches out, moves a couple pieces. Keith barely notices, eyes fixated on her face, on the small smile that resides there, hidden beneath the tension. And hopefully, one day, Veronica and I can meet together in earnest. So is that it, huh? Keith's eyes drop back to the flower, preserved and perfect, shining with dew that doesn't exist, crafted from the magic of the man he loves. You just hope. No, she says sharply. I fight for what I want. But sometimes that fight means waiting and biding your time. Keith sinks lower in his seat, grumbling and frustrated. I hate waiting. I know. She leans back in her seat, clasping her hands together, turning to gaze distantly out the window over the winter mountains. But they're worth it in the end. And then slowly, a smile creeps across her lips. Veronica leaves me sunflowers. They're much more difficult to hide, but it's endearing. So Keith receives the blue forget-me-not, and Veronica leaves Aksha sunflowers. I mean, they must have all something in common. So that's beautiful. But hey, I wanted to play it out a little bit here. But hey, I didn't know Aksha has a relationship with Veronica. You know, two different courts. It's about timing and everything. I mean, biding time is the hardest thing to do. Just keep waiting until it's time to go. It's time to go. Alright, let's go on. Time is a strange thing here in the Fey realm. He had been warned of it, had heard stories of time passing at strange intervals, had heard of the perpetual twilight and how that could warp his perception of time. The Fey realm exists in a pocket of its own, a world connected to his own, but wholly separate. He has lines scratched into the stone walls of his room, tallies for every sleep he's had to mark the passing days. Every time he carves a shallow groove into the stone brick, he wonders if time is passing the same way in the human realm, if things will be just the same as he left, or if more time is passing there, or if it will be just the same. He wonders how Paige and Matt are doing. Shio has surely been called back to the summer court. So what of the tattoo parlor shop? What of Cosmo? How can Shay? Lance? Still, there's nothing he can do but wait out his days and count them as they pass, slipping through his fingers like grains of sand, each one bleeding into the next as adrenaline peters out and monotony creeps in, dull and lifeless in a world that's supposed to be full of life. It feels like a statue, face held impassive and carved into an eternal scowl, grew of that expression deepening every day. He feels removed from them all, numb to the fear and intimidation he once felt, now filled with restlessness, boredom, and frustration. He waits, he watches, he observes, he plays by the rules, holds his own cards close to the chest, biding his time until he can play his hand. He has never thought of himself as a patient man, but here he has to be. So when the frustration becomes too much, when the restlessness is a jitteriness beneath his skin and a crawling in his bones, when training with oxygen doesn't alleviate this relentless energy and the walls of his room feel like they're pressing in on his lungs, he goes to the gardens, if only to breathe, if only to get a reprieve and solitude, if only to remind himself that, despite it all, there's beauty in this realm. The realm his mother is from. Here, in the gardens, carefully separated from prying eyes, seated and nestled at the base of a winter willow tree, whose leaves and branches draped with crystalline beads of eyes that create a curtain to obscure him from view. Here he sits, and here he breathes. With one knee pulled up and elbow propped on it, fingers toying with the ear cuff he hasn't removed since he's arrived, carefully feeling the smooth surface of the gemstone beneath his fingertips. The magic of this realm sings in his veins. He hears the music faintly in the whispering wind. He feels it like a balm on his skin, re-energizing in ways he never imagined possible. It coaxes open the bloom of his own magic, usually bundled so tight in his chest, fearful and hidden away. But here he blooms, and unfurls into a magnificent fireflower, with petals like blazes that wisp at the edges, heat radiating throughout his body and fighting off the winter chill, wrapping around his heart and making him feel stronger, grounded, steady. He holds his other hand out, illy twisting his wrist and curling his fingers. Fire dances between them, little snakes of it that sizzle to life down his arm, sparking and leaping until they catch, and then rolling in little streaks of flame down his wrist to play between his fingers. The way he moves, the way his fire moves, it reminds him of water, graceful and fluid, endless and flowing. And he knows it's Lance. And he knows it because Lance is the one who had taught him how to harness his magic. It makes him smile as he watches flames, a small, secretive thing, a warmth in his heart knowing that despite being so far, Lance is here with him now, in everything he does, in this core piece of him. It wishes Lance were here, under the winter willow, watching him freely play with his magic. He thinks Lance would like it here. He thinks Lance will be proud of him for embracing this piece of himself. He knows the air is cold, but Lance's lips will be so warm. A breeze rolls through the gardens, causing the willows to beat like leaves, and drooping branches to shift and clatter. The ice chimes as it knocks together, filling the air with dissonant music. It draws Keith's attention, pulling his eyes up to watch as the twilight clouds dance off the shifting glass-like beads. In the shadow in the corner of his eye, his hand is on the ground, weight leaning onto it as he uses it to pivot, pushing himself to his feet and twisting, ending in a low crouch with that hand embracing the ground, flames burning hot and high, spiraling around his arm like a snake. But it's his other arm that burns, forearms stinging like needles beneath his skin as his blood bubbles to the surface, surging down his wrist to his palm, facing dark purple smoke through his skin that becomes solid as his hand closes around it. He holds his closed fist in front of him, wrapped around the hilt of his dagger, blade running parallel with his arm. The figure coming through the trees has stilled, standing with one arm out, moving the curtain of beads out for her passage. She's tall, built strong with wide shoulders, thick thighs, and arms that are just a hair too long. Her skin has that purple tinge he's starting to associate with the winter court high fae. Marked come up with her neck, over her jaw and cheeks to a point. Sclera gold. Hair purple fading to magenta, ears pointed at the tip and lobe. Suspicion creeps through his veins, prickly and nail sharp, and just barely conceals something brighter that he refuses to acknowledge, something that makes his heart race. His eyes narrow. She meets his gaze unflinchingly, and then steps beneath the willow, letting the curtain shift close behind her. She takes only a few steps, hands clasped behind her back, formal, stiff, casually indifferent, expression pulled tight and eyes hard. There are two kinds of masks amongst the fae, those that smile and those that frown. Who are you? You may call me Crolia, she says simply, voice even, and yet almost a whisper, voice unshaking, and yet quivering at the fraying edges. She takes a breath, chin lifting higher, voice gaining strength as she declares, Aksha is looking for you. Kate strains slowly, but he doesn't pull his magic back. And she sends you? I offered. Her eyes trail down Kate's right arm, eyebrows raising at the fire, but her attention didn't stick, which is strange in and of itself. Most winter court fae are wary of his fire. No, instead, her gaze fixates on his blade, but not with the same sort of trepidation or fascination that he's used to. She looks at it with eyes that betray nothing, but an air that betrays familiarity. Then her gaze is moving up his arm where his lips are pushed back, brows furrowed as she gazes at the ink that covers his birthmark. He lets her, though he's not sure why. Perhaps it's because he's used to being a spectacle here, but that doesn't explain why he's holding his breath. Your tattoos, she says slowly. Curiosity. Odd. They're real. Ah, so that's where her confusion lies. Fae in this realm are often born with markings. Those without them can give themselves elaborate designs with glamour as easily as they can give themselves clothes. Tattoos, however, real ink. That's stuff of the moral realm, a human thing. He's seen plenty of fae be tattooed by Shiro, but they've been wild fae and domesticated fae. Yes, he releases his grip on the dagger, then it turns to smoke before being absorbed back into his palm. It stings as it settles beneath his skin, and he flexes his fingers to chase the sensation away. He releases his hold on his fire as well. They're magicit. His brows furrow. How do you... Her gaze flickers back to his, a small smile ghosting at the corner of her lips. I am familiar with blood magic. I know what to look for, though I've never seen it utilized like this. Her gaze betrays nothing, but it's heavy and weighs on his heart, tugging in ways that leave him off balance, unable to catch his breath. You are very resourceful. I've had to be. I'm sure your parents are proud. The air rushes from his lungs. He knows this game. The way she prods, the way she sidesteps. It's an indirect game, one he's learned with Shiro and Lance. He's proud when his voice does waver. My father is dead. There. It's only there for a moment. Brave a fraction of a second. Something so minute and easily missed if he hadn't been looking for it, waiting for it. It's a flicker across her face, a purse over her lips, a pinch over her brow, a sorrow and surprise that twists across her eyes before the mask is back in place, untouched and smooth. But Keith had seen it. And your mother? I'd never known her. The woman. Crolia nods. Once, short, then steps aside, steps back, pulls the willow leaves aside, and gives a little bow. Perhaps one day you will. But for now, Aksha is waiting. He steps past her without a word. She doesn't make eye contact. She doesn't follow him back to the place, but he can feel her gaze lingering. He can feel the blood ring in his ears. He can feel his heart hammering and his knees shake. When he looks over her shoulder, she's gone, and the willow leaves dance in the wind. Oof. You know that sort of feeling that when you see someone you met Crolia? Yeah, probably has to feel with all the magic, and she shocked about the tattoos and everything. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of this Fae stuff and how this heritage is going to be, because Keith uses his own magic, his blood magic. You've seen a lot of it from the last chapters that you've read before, but hey, that's all into it. Hopefully you studied enough so you can pull it out and see how this play goes. So good for them. Okay. Keith's role as knight gives him an intimidation factor he hadn't been anticipating, but extremely grateful for all the same. He had been afraid that despite Lothar's declarations of him as a changeling, they Fae would just know. That they see through his weak blood and his feeble clamor. He had always thought that Fae could somehow sniff him out, that they could just feel the iron in his veins. But they can't. They don't seem to notice. They take the prince's word at face value. Why wouldn't they? Fae can't lie, and Lothar had spoken the truth, telling facts about the changelings and letting the court have the indication that Keith is one of them. As expected, he is the subject of fascination amongst the court. However, they pleasantly give him a wide berth, and those who dare to scare too close are the subject of Keith's scowl. He wears it like a barbed mask, warning all those brave enough to approach the thing twice. It helps that he spent most of his time with Aksha. He's found that the people are also worried and avoidant of Lothor's chosen generals, and they have an intimidation act of their own. So Keith lets them stare, as long as from a distance, lets them watch as he trains with Aksha, his blade out and his magic flaring up his arm. His flames clashing with Aksha's eyes. He lets them stare for once, lets it breathe their fear, all the while keeping his skill sharp, keeping his reflexes pawned. He's never trained with anyone other than Shiro, and he finds that, surprisingly, he holds his ground well. Aksha's faster than Shiro, but not nearly as strong and not nearly as crafty. Keith is pleased to find that Shiro's training to prepare him to fight off Fae hasn't been in vain, though he doubts Shiro ever anticipated this. Still, he's grateful. It means he might just be able to pull this off. I definitely hope so. I mean, there's like advantages and there's some disadvantages of how this plan, but heck with it. Let's play off this game and just start making moves. He hadn't known this moment would come, but he had foolishly been hoping he would be freed of the Winter Court before it could, hadn't allowed it to permeate his thoughts, out of sight, out of mind. Because he had come to terms with and steel himself against the thought of ending the Queen's life, he hadn't prepared himself to execute anyone else, which is unfortunately the whole purpose of his mantle, to be a reaper of death for the royal family. So when the Queen says, "Knight," in a raspy, sharp tone, coated in barbed eyes, he's not prepared. He startles, freezes, stares at her back with wide eyes. She doesn't say anything, but Lothar turns his head just slightly from where he lounges on his throne, meeting Keith's eyes and giving him the barest little frown, nodding towards his mother. It shakes Keith out of his scepter, and he stumbles forward with uncertain steps. He hopes it comes across as slow and measured, and not at all like his knees are shaking and his pulse is ringing in his ears. He hopes they can't hear the rapid pound of his heart beating in his throat as he walks past the thrones, to the front of the dais, and down his steps to where the Queen looms above the captive Fae. He's on his knees, an older Fae, but it looks him grizzled and aged, with lines around his mouth and eyes, gray streaks and tufts of hair that almost looks like ears, purple skin, eyes a solid ground. His hands are bound behind his back by thick vines as he bows at the Queen's feet. Keith risks a glance at her face, but finds nothing other than narrowed eyes and a slight purse to her lips, impassive as ever, even as she orders death to one of her people. "Kill him," she says simply. She doesn't even bother looking at Key. Simply waves a claw hand to Faye and turns on her heel, stepping back up to her throne before sinking to it. Hunched but regal all the same. Key watches her go, then turns to Faye on his knees. He holds his mask in place, hoping the court doesn't see it waver. He feels his brows pinch and his lips curl into a frown. Hopes it looks like one of his infamous scowls. He hopes they can't sense fear, his unease, the way his stomach twists and rolls, bile biting at the back of his tongue. He hates Faye. He's always has. He's been taught to fear and run and hide. He knows they'll kill him if they could, just for having iron in his blood. And yet, he stares down at the man, the Faye. Faz, Keith vaguely remembers. And they call him Faz. As he stares down at him, Keith feels no anger, no bloodlust, no drive for vengeance, no desire to spill his blood. He feels nothing but cold sweat and churning nausea. It doesn't help that Keith has seen the mark on his forearm, the mark of Memora. "Delay no further, knight." The Queen's voice sharp, commanding, yet infused with indifference and boredom that leaves it bland and monotoned. Keith swallows, nearly chokes at the bile that surges up his throat. He steps up to the man on his knees and holds out his hand, summoning the wisp of smoke from his palm, gripping the hand up as it solidifies into his familiar dagger. He sees the Faye's eyes flicker to his arm, to meet Keith's gaze, and he nods. Barely perceivable, but definitely there. A small, slight incline of his head, a purse of his lips, eyes falling shut as he leans his head back, giving Keith clear access to his throat. Keith can't move. He can't breathe. He can't do this. This man is Faye, but he's done nothing wrong. Not as far as Keith can see. He's charged with treason, for being a spy in the court, for being a Memora rebel, and he's Keith's blood, if only faintly. And Keith can't kill him. Not like this. Not in cold blood. Not while he's bound and on his knees, and the entire winter court is staring. Gazes, hungry and fixated, practically oozing a frenzied bloodlust that permeates the air and tastes sour Keith's tongue. But he has to. He has to. Because he was ordered to, and even though he can disobey, a true knight couldn't. He has to keep his cover safe. If he wants to fulfill his deal with Lotor, if he wants to be free, Shiro to be free, to see land again, the court silent, collectively holding their breaths. Excitement bubbling through the air and seeing across Keith's skin like a living thing. He closes his eyes, raises his blade, steels himself in hopes that his stomach will be fine long enough for him to get somewhere private after this. "Stop!" Lotor's voice is clear and firm as it cuts through the silence. He freezes. The court gasps. His eyes snap open. Arm lowering as he turns to the dais. Lotor stands from his throne, hands clasped behind his back, chin raised high. The Queen glares at him, eyes narrow and lips pursed. He turns to her, offering a respectful bow and says, "I humbly request that we postpone this man's execution. I believe that he has more information to give us, and I believe I know some ways to get it out of him. But your will, Mother?" The court is silent, watching, curious. The Queen looks him over, but after a moment, she finally nods. "Do what you will, but I expect results." She stands, leaving the throne room without another word, the crowd parting for her as she passes, bowing like a wave. Lothar snaps his fingers, and his general steps forward, taking fast by the arms and leading him away. Keith releases his dagger, and the sting of it settling back beneath his skin feels like relief. He catches the prince's eyes as it starts to turn away, catches a slight nod, the acknowledgement. Keith gives him one in return. It's the closest thing to a thanks that he'll give in Fey realm. This is scary. This is probably the most scary thing that I've ever seen. Oh, I just stare at myself in the mirror. I don't know why. But it's the scariest thing ever. Does it move? He's the knight. The only in control is by either Lotor or his mother. But, oh my god, this is the scariest thing I ever think. But, oh shoot, this, I got goosebumps for this. Thanks, what's your name? I got goosebumps. Alright, anyways. It's a few days later when Keith makes his way to the Winter Willow for some time alone that he sees Crowley again. He pauses as the beady leaves sway back into place behind him, eyes narrow as he takes her in. What she wears is form-fitting, armored in places. He wonders if it's real armor, or if glamour can be hardened to the same. The hood is pulled up, keeping most of her face in shadow as she leans against the tree, arms folded over her chest, watching him. What are you doing here? He approaches her slowly, warily, trying to temper the strange exhilaration that bubbles in his chest. She waits until he's closer, regards him silently. Beneath the shadow of her hood, her face is softer, less guarded. Also somber as her gaze takes him in, as if memorizing him. His breath is shallow under the inspection, a lump in his throat that chokes him. I'm leaving, she says simply, and he feels the air rush from his lungs. She pushes off the tree, taking a step to his side, eyes moving to the palace that lays beyond the private bubble of the Winter Willow, beyond the gardens and up on the hill. It's not safe for me anymore. Our cover has been blown. Your cover? She turns to him, the ghost of a smile on her lips, mischief in her eyes. I think you know what cover I speak of. The Winter Court considers you traitors. She says something. Merrily gives a small nod. If it's so dangerous for you here, why be here at all? We were asked by the Summer Princess to keep an eye on you, said the ships. The bear slumped to her posture. I cannot anymore. You'll be on your own. Her gaze is sharp, steady, but there's a pinch around her eyes, lines cutting deep as she frowns. Stay sharp. Keep your guard up. Look for your opportunity. Take it and run. When she reaches out, he forces himself not to flinch, keep his feet grounded. Her hand is heavy weight on his shoulder, and he's surprised that he doesn't hate it. It's comforting, almost, in a way he doesn't really understand that. He does, because looking up, mirror eyes, he knows, and she knows. They both know, but now isn't the time. We're watching from afar. We have your back. Thank you. He breathes, voice shaky. Her smile is small, but cracks through her mask, giving way to a hint of fondness. You shouldn't thank a fae, I know, but I think I can trust you. She merely smiles, makes to move past him, but as she does, the hand on his shoulder tightens, pulls him close as she leans to his ear. It was something that has his hair standing on end, shivers running across his skin, settling down to his marrow with a vibration that resonates at his core, has his magic quaking and swirling, heat in his veins, air rushing from his lungs as sparks crackle behind his eyes. As she pulls away, he gapes at her. What was that? When she smiles, she sees her fangs, so much like his own. A mother always knows her child's true name. It is the boon we keep at birth. I was never able to give you yours. But this, you're truly your own. Be careful who you give it to. His hand is on hers, shaking but firm, as he squeezes. Be careful. I will. He watches her go, watches long after she disappeared and the willow leaves have stopped swaying. He can feel the sound of his true name resonating through him, a radiant bundle of energy, fuel, power. He feels complete in a way that he's never known. He feels stronger. He feels ready. Okay, that tension kind of stays down for a bit. Wow. Well, Crowley finally decides to leave because she was told by the Sun Princess to keep an eye on Keith at all times. From the other side, okay, this is kind of a little bit of tension there. So when it finally starts to crack, it finally starts to crack. Alright, I'm going to give this last sentence right here before I will put this away. Opportunities, however, are hard to come by. The queen is secretive, hidden away, always surrounded by people when she does show her face. But he waits. He watches. He steels himself. He's ready. The first time the queen approaches him, he's training with Aksha in one of the many courtyards of the palace. Her presence sounds, but she brings with her an icy wind that whips past him, forming ice in his veins. The rush of it is strong, causing him to stumble and Aksha to flinch. They both freeze, still like statues mid-combat. Their eyes meet, wide, startled, brief panic, momentary terror, then steel as they both strain slowly, turn to face her. The queen isn't a tall figure. She must only reach Keith's shoulder, and even then, she slumped, head hanging low beneath her blood, shoulders hunched. Yet despite her stature, her presence looms over them all. Powerful, terrifying, her mere aura making Keith's hair stand on end, his magic tensing and coiling, adrenaline fueling a recreationary fight or flight response. Yet he stays where he stands, feet firmly rooted as both he and Aksha incline their heads in a slight bow, in unison, as if she were pulling at their strings. Her servants flank her, the tall, slender fae that more than make up for her own height, long robes, curved beak-like masks with slitted, glowing eyes, shadows within, arms that are too long and claws that curl with an extra knuckle. "Night," she says, voice raspy and sharp. She hates to speak loudly, but her voice carries all the same, silent across skin like jagged eyes. "I hope you haven't tired yourself out." There is a mocking edge to it, a sneer somewhere beneath the shadows of her hood. Keith's throat feels dry, voice far too stiff. "No, your majesty." "Good. You will need your strength. Come." She turns on her heel and strides away, her robes sliding and curling like shadows against the cobblestones. Her servants step aside for her, but their eyes are on Keith, waiting. "Go," Aksha whispers, a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. He glances at her, meets her gaze, sees all the things she doesn't dare say. She nods. He returns it, and then her hand falls. "Best not keep the queen waiting." Without a word, he looks away, keeping his head held high and eyes focused straight ahead as he walks after the queen with quick, clipped steps. He feels too tense, but he also thinks that's warranted given the situation, given the queen is calling on him, given that her servants wait for him to pass before falling into step behind him, watching shadows, soulless eyes burning at the back of his neck. The queen leads him through the palace, through the endlessly twisting halls, the wide, sweeping corridors lined with elaborate stained glass and velvet curtains, lit up with dancing globes of light that chase each other like fireflies. She leads him down the large, curved staircase that leads down into the grand foyer, down the thick, dark purple carpet that guides the way to the door, past the statues carved of crystalline eyes that will never melt, depicting creatures of twisted beauty and eerie grace. She leads him through the grand doors to the Winter Palace, nearly 2 stories tall and carved from dark wood, both of them elaborate in design and leafed in silver and gold. She leads him down the long, irregular steps, carved out of the earth itself, and lined with stones that are etched with frost. Down, down, down the path that twists around the hill that the palace sits atop, through fields of dry grass that crackles like haunted laughter in the wind, past the leafless trees dipped in layers of smooth ice that glisten in the low light, branches twisted and frozen, reaching out with claw-like silhouettes, deep into the valley proper and through the winterwood, leaving the castle far behind where it looms tall and proud atop the central hill. She leads him through the forest, through fields where snow lays untouched and soft. It crunches beneath his boots. But not a sound comes from the queen, not from her servants. Their robes leave trails in the untouched snow, but not a footprint to be seen. More of her servants join them as they walk, peeling from the shadows and falling into step around them. Then the path starts to curve upwards, trees start to fall away, and they emerge from the wood, following the path up another short hill. Atop this short hill sits a single crumble tower. It's not very big, perhaps only a single room wide and a single story tall, more of an elaborate circular hut than anything, with large stones that have crumbled away and lay forgotten in the snow at the tower's base. Around the stone crawls deep purple vines, sprouting long petaled red flowers. Windows encircle the stone in even measures, open to the wind. The entrance is a large archway without a door. As they approach, Key can feel in the air the static-like pulse of energy, of magic, crackling across his skin and making his heart race reflexively. When in the tower, he sees nothing. Nothing but the vague, shifting translucent shimmer, as if the space itself were alive. The queen pauses at the end of the path before the large archway. She doesn't turn as she speaks. You grew up a changeling, did you not? Yes. He hopes his voice is steady. The lie tastes like ash on a stone. Did you know much of our realm? No. That at least he can say truthfully. What do you think of our lands? The Winterlands. It's very beautiful here, he says, allowing himself to show some earnest awe. Just a sliver, just enough that she nods in satisfaction. My servants have told me that you were unconscious when you came through the fairy ring. Correct? Yes, your majesty. Then I suggest you prepare yourself. Come. She sets up the small tower. Through the doorway into the depths of the shimmering veil, he pauses, watching as her form blurs and shifts, folded up in the translucent cloth the air has become, until she fades completely. Next to him, her servants shift. He can feel their eyes on him, but he refuses to look. Instead, he takes a breath through his nose, lifts his chin, and strides forward. Nervousness crawls beneath his skin, but he doesn't allow himself any more hesitation. He steps into the tower, feeling the shift as he moves through the archway. The air changes, becomes more dense, despite the way the shimmering veil moves. There's no wind. It's still, thick, pressing in on Keats from all sides, like wading into the ocean. Pressure building with every step, air becoming thinner even as it feels thicker, until he's gasping for shallow breaths. Dots crawl the edges of his vision. The air in front of him shimmers and shines, shifting and swirling, a living thing, solid even if he can't touch it. His hair lifts with it, floats lazily around him. Gravity seems to lift. He floats. He drips. His body is alight, not with cold and not with heat, not with pain, not with pleasure, but alight all the same. Every single nerve ending ignited and firing, but his mind being unable to figure out what the sensation is. He blinks, but everything is bright, blinding, white. He feels the tug, the strange tilt, the push and pull as everything shifts. And then he opens his eyes, and new surroundings start to fade into focus. A new archway, made of stone that's much darker. He faces it. He walks towards it. In fact, he feels like he never stopped walking throughout the whole process. Everything merely shifted between one step and the next, and then he's walking out, onto a new hill, one covered in long, thick green grass, a dark and thriving forest spreading out of the base of the hill, rising tall all around them. The air here is warmer and far more human. When he turns, he sees a similar but different tower. The one has no roof, and is crumbled into near ruin. Only the bare bones of an archway and walls remain. The dark, cracked stone can barely be seen beneath the thick moss that crawls and devours it, until the tower appears to be a growth of the hill itself. And beyond the archway, he sees the shimmering air of the fairy ring. As the queen's servants begin to pass through, he turns away, finding her a few feet down the hill, watching him from beneath her hood, glowing faintly golden, sunken to sharp and twisted features. Do you know where we are, knight? Despite the new temperature, her response brings it with a familiar chill winter. Despite having gone through the fairy ring, despite knowing they're no longer in the Winterlands, he knows instantly that they're not in the mortal realm either. Magic is still thick in the air. He swallows, giving a quick shake of his head. No, your majesty. These are part of the wildlands, the natural territories that lie between the courts. She turns, gesturing to the forest with a clawed hand before it falls limply to her side. As she starts down the path, Key automatically steps after her. Her servants fall into place around them. Do you know why I brought you here, knight? They step beneath the canopy of the forest, into the shadows. The fog is thick here, white and ghostly as it clings to the ground, swirling and dancing between the trees, obscuring everything. The twilight sky can be seen between trunks, fiery hues creating burning silhouettes. Moss hangs from the drooping tree branches, ghostly and gray. Flowers dot the forest floor, but their petals glow and shiver, pulling away from them as they pass. Motes of lights blink and bob, chiming like distant bells, sweet and enticing. He's unsure they're fireflies, small fay, or will-o'-the-wisp. No, your majesty, he says, reaching out to push aside a draping of moss. As she walks, the fog seems to curl away from her, and he notices fractals of frost forming on the grass where she steps. You're here to do your duty. A shiver runs down his spine, a lump forming in his throat, catching the sharp intake of breath. My son seems to think that you're worth keeping as a knight. I have my doubts, but Sendak was a magnificent knight, and you somehow managed to fell him. So perhaps you shall also show potential. Here, you will prove to me your worth. He holds his voice steady, steels himself the best he knows how, ignores the burning in his veins and the tight knot in his chest, and those sorts of nervousness crawling beneath his skin, anticipation, apprehension, hope, dread, eagerness, terror. Here they are so far from the Winter Court. Here they far from the prying eyes of the Winter Fae. It's only him, her, and the servants. What would you have me to do, your majesty? Monotoned, dark, indifferent. You shall see. As they walk, the path gets more twisted, splitting and forking. The fork gets thicker, branches reaching out to snag at him and his hair, catching on his glamour clothes. And then the trees stop. Before them rises a hill, barren trees but littered with flowers that glow faintly. Beyond the hill, the land slopes down to a small valley, a pond lying in the center, barely visible through the shadows and fog. Atop the hill, overlooking the pond, rising out of the lingering fog, is a circle of large sandstones, unlike Stonehenge, he thinks, but on a far smaller scale. The queen stops before the tree line, still hidden in the shadows, gaze turned toward the circle of stones. There, she says, lifting a hand to point a clawed crooked finger. Your target waits for you there. My target? Her hand drops to her side, sleeves falling to cover most of her hands once more. The Memora traitor that my son saved from execution, after some persuasion. He gave us some interesting information. Infiltrations of spies amongst my court. Defected Winter Fae, who now aid the Summer Court. Despicable traitorous vermin. She hisses between sharp teeth, lips curling to a sneer. They'd see my family fall. I shall see them dead. She lifts a claw hand, thrusting an arm out. The reaction is instant. Her servants move, merging into the forest like shadows, fanning out in both directions. But two remain, flanking behind Keith, looming over him, watchful and ominous. You use our prisoner to send a message, requesting a Summer Court representative to meet him here. She starts up the hill, gesturing for Keith to follow. Her ghastly servants stay behind as they stride into the open. The grass frosts and whiffers beneath the queen's feet, the fog parting for her and swirling back into a thick blanket in her wake, coiling around Keith's legs. His heart's in his throat, birthmark burning and blood boiling. His palm prickles with needles, itching to release his dagger. Still, he holds, walks, waits. If the information I've gathered is correct, and it always is, then the man who will come is one of the great interests, one whose presence has been a stain in my plans for many years, one who does not deserve his place at his prince's side, a place better suited for my son. His body feels cold even as his blood runs hot. His ears are ringing, and his head feels dizzy. His hands shake, not from fear, but from anger, from a rage that furrows in his chest, old and patient, unleashed in a beautiful bloom. His steps remain steady. This man is your target. The queen's voice pierces his mask, fracturing his steady calm. Still, she doesn't turn to notice the twitch of his brow or the curl of his lip, nor does she see the burning fury behind his eyes. His presence has been a thorn in my side far too long. You will kill him. You will do so quickly and efficiently. These are my orders, and by your mantle, you will carry them out, regardless of our laws. Despite your previous engagements, your loyalties now belong to me. Your blood is tied to my blood. Your will is that of the court. Do you understand? So have you commanded, he says, voice low and clipped. His words taste like acid in his tongue, burning down his throat to settle in his gut, riffing and coiled. So shall it be. The climb up the hill takes an eternity, each step stretching seconds beyond measure, each footfall vibrating through him, rooting him to the spot, for eons before that foot peels away from the earth. And yet, before he knows it, he is blinking up at the massive stones. They tower over him, blocking much of a view out inside the circle. The fog is high here, caught up his waist and swirling with every swing of his arms. Picking up that his own feet are obscured, they walk up behind a stone, and the queen signals for him to remain behind cover as she steps around it. A twist of her wrist and a curl of her finger urging him to circle around behind. Then she steps out of the sight and through the stones. I see our information was correct, he hears her say, voice chilling and rough, but lifting at the edges in cruel amusement. Key turns, following instruction, intent on circling round when he freezes at the familiar voice. What are you doing here? Beautiful, even indignant, high-pitched and surprised, sturdy despite the underlying fear. Lance. He had been expecting it, and yet his voice hits Keith hard all the same. A punch to the chest that has the air rushing from his lungs, has him freezing in his tracks, bent over as the blow rolls through him, one hand on the stone to steady himself. I'm here to see you, young one. Keith shivers, hates the delight in her voice, the cruelty that oozes between her teeth, but it helps him come back to himself, helps him find his balance, and breath once more, helps him move, because he has a job to do. He crouches low, slinking along the outside of the stones, fingertips trailing along the rough surfaces. Footsteps sound in the soft grass. The wind kicks up blowing cold as the two face off within the circle. The fog swirls around him, playful and comforting. He hides in it, darts from shadow to shadow. Between stones, he sees the two figures, the short hunched form of the queen, the tall and proud silhouette of Lance, skirted by fog. The sight of him fills Keith with excitement and dread in equal measure. He's glad he's here. He wishes he had stayed away. Where is Fast? Once behind him, he presses his back into a large stone, closing his eyes and breathing in deep, steadying himself. He finally gives in to the itch, releases his dagger, and embraces the sharp pain as the smoke oozes from his palm. His fingers close around it, making it solid, and he pulls his hand to his chest, dagger ready, feeling his heart beat against his ribs. He is no more, but rest assured, he was extremely valuable in his last moments. A chuckle, soft and cracking, like the ominous sound of ice splintering across the lake. He managed to get you to come, alone. You have always been a fool to think you could survive reaching so far above your station. When Keats opens his eyes, he sees the shadows at the base of the hill moving, the ghost-like forms of the queen's servants floating through fog, slitted eyes glowing in the dim light, swarming down below, circling like vultures, waiting for the queen's call. Careful, your majesty. He hears the cockiness Lance's voice, the false bravado that almost covers the faint quitter he only notices because he knows where to find. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were insulting me. It would be uncouth for royalty to insult someone so openly. He takes a deep breath, takes his toes into the soft earth, and pushes, slipping around the large stone, darting into the circle and light, silent feet, crouched low in the fog. Lance isn't far, hand backed away from the queen, no more than 10 feet away. He closes the distance quickly, slides up right behind him, straightening and pressing in close, until they're only a scant few inches away. His breath on the back of Lance's neck, and a hand pressed to his back to soothe him and keep him from jumping as his arm wraps around the pressed edge of his dagger against his throat. But Lance doesn't flinch, doesn't jump, freezes with only a soft hitch of his breath when he feels Keith's hand on his back. Keith can't see his face, but he can see the queen over his shoulder, standing across the circle, head lifted high enough for him to see the way her golden eyes crinkle as her lips split into a wicked grin, with far too many teeth that are far too sharp. I do not think I will have to worry about sliding you. After all, soon you will be no more, and my son can take his rightful place in the summer court. Keith, Lance breathes. There is a slight tilt to his head, like he's so intended to turn to see him, but he stops still. I'm here, he whispers, lips barely moving. a bubble too soft to carry. Laura will never welcome Lotor to her side if you do this. Perhaps not immediately, but in time, she will. After my son comforts her in her grief, after he explains to her how you used your position at her side for power, but had a heart and loyalties that lie elsewhere, for a chamberlain nonetheless, for the very knight who will take your life. Keith can feel Lance tremble. It's only slight, only the barest shiver, but he feels it. He runs his hand in small circles to Lance's back, hidden from the Queen's sight. Feels Lance lean into it, making it show pulling away from the dagger. In time, the princess will lose faith in your memory. She will cease to mourn you, and you will be forgotten. A footnote in the empire my son will build. The Queen glowing continues. In the wind, the stone circle starts to pick up, fueled by her cruel glee. A breeze that moves around them, swirling the fog around the stones, blowing away from the center where they stand. Her long, ragged hair shifts in the breeze, her cloak being tugged by it. The air is frigid here amongst the stone circle, but Lance is warm beneath his touch. And I will have the immense pleasure of watching you die by the hands of the man you were foolish enough to think you could love. Keith takes that as his cue that her speech is over. His hand drops from Lance's back, but he keeps the knife at his throat as he steps around him, slowly circling, on measured steps, face locked in an indifferent mask. He hopes it's dramatic enough for the Queen to spare him this moment. He hopes she relishes it enough for him to be slow about it. He steps in front of Lance, still so close, dagger held so close to his throat. He blocks Lance from view, standing directly between him and the Queen, and then their eyes meet. Lance's face stone, carved in perfect sweeping angles, polished to perfection, eyes glistening like sapphires and reflecting the fire of the twilight sky. But as he looks at Keith, as his face is hidden from view, Keith watches those eyes melt into a tremulous sea, watches his posture wane slightly, and watches his lips tug at the corners. He's not sure what to say, what to do, so he says the only thing he can think. This was a trap. There's a pause, and then a soft, sharp exhale. The ghost of a smile playing across Lance's lips, and his eyes crinkling at the corners. No crap! But I knew that coming to this. Keith blinks, raspberry. Then, why? Lance's eyes fell between Keith's, lips tugging into a smirk. Cocky as always, even with a knife at his throat. We knew from the moment we were contacted by Faz that it was a trap. We had already been warned that he had been captured. But it was a good opportunity to lure her out of her cords. With you as bait? Keith hisses. Lance's eyes narrow, amusement dancing in their blue depths, crashing waves in the swirling storm. The perfect bait. We figured she would have you kill me. And we have a feeling she would want to watch. You're insane. Keith breathes, resisting the urge to shake his head. But judging from Lance's soft chuckle, the sentiment gets across. And you call me hot-headed and reckless. They've been keeping their voices down. Low murmurs that even the wind can't carry. Words kept private between them. A lover's last moment. Still, the Queen's patience only lasts so long. This is touching, but the time has come, Knight, she says. Say your goodbyes and end his life. And as your Queen, I command it. What do we do? Keith whispers. Eyes searching for Lance's life, mind whirling, trying to scrap together some sort of plan in the space between heartbeats. Her servants are down below. As soon as I turn on her, they'll rush to defend her. It'll be enough of a slight for them to attack me. Land chips, one end snaking up to lay in Keith's chest, right over his brand, right over his heart. You're not alone, he whispers, expression hardening like ice. The Mori tribe is here. They'll keep her servants distracted. I won't do anything till you're out of here safe. She can't hurt me. I've done nothing, and she can't break our laws. I don't care. Lance pauses, his fingers curl on the Keith shirt. He leans it close, and Keith extremely twists the knife until it's pressing into the flat of it rather than the edge. Lance's breath is hot against his lips, smirk coy and mischievous as he says, Cosmo's here. And then Lance's hand is at the back of his head, fingers combing through his hair before yanking him forward, crashing their lips together. Their kiss is brutal. It's rough. Their teeth clack together, and their lips bruise, but neither of them pull away. They sing to each other, taking, stealing this moment, claiming it as their own. With Lance's tongue in his mouth and his dagger to Lance's throat, they give nothing but take, take, take. The man he loves pressed against him, body rolling out flush, and head twisted to get a deep angle. The wind whips up around them, a powerful gale that threatens to tear them apart, and yet cannot truly touch them. Adrenaline surges in his veins, hot and heavy, magic thrumming through his body in time with his balls, vibrating and seeping out through his pores, sparks crackling along his skin, eager to ignite. He hears the hiss of the splasher, but he knows the queen doesn't think much of it. He sees this moment as a goodbye rather than what it was. A good luck. Then they're breaking apart, gasping his lungfuls of frigid air that bites at the back of his throat. Lance releases him and stumbles a backstep. 2. Key lets him go. Watches Lance find his balance. Watches him pull himself up to his full height, chin high, smirk cocky, magic pulsing dimly behind his eyes. His clothes whip around him. His hair flutters in the wind, and yet the chill cannot touch him. Snow has started to form in the gale the queen has summoned, but it melts as it touches Lance's flesh. He's beautiful. He's wild. He gives Keith a slight nod, lifting his fingers to his lips, and letting those loose a sharp whistle. A crackle of energy, the ripping of air. A poof of smoke appears a second later, dark and twisted and swept away, playing off the feline form of a large wolf. He leans against Lance, and Lance's hands smirk into his fur, but he looks to Keith, regarding him with eyes that glow gold. Blue shimmers across his fur. Get him out of here, Cosmo. Keith whispers. Lance smirks. Give her hell. And then they're gone in another crackle of static and explosion of smoke. They're gone, and Keith is alone in the eye of the storm. They're gone. And Keith turns to face the Winter Queen. Where has he gone? She cries, voice out in rage, cracked and splintered as she howls above the wind. Go after him! Kill him! No! He says it loud enough for his voice to carry. Firm, solid, grounded despite the storm swirling, whipping hail and snow and fog around the stone circle, blocking out the hill and forest beyond, sealing them away. Just him and her. What? She takes a step forward. 2. Teeth clenched and gold mist wisping away from eyes like smoke. What did you say to me? No. Slowly, methodically, like he's done 1,000 times before. He lowers himself into a crouch, knees bent, both arms up, dagger in his hand and at the ready. With nothing more than a thaw, he lets his magic ignite, let flames come to life across his skin, dancing and sizzling and burning for blood. I will not. You, how dare you? You can't, she sputters. She hisses, she spits, she gnashes her teeth. You are the Winter Knight. You will obey me. I am the Winter Knight, he says slowly, eyes narrow against the wind, laser focused as a strange calm settles over him, despite the storm that rages with her temper, the shadows that have started to form outside the wall of her wind, despite the fear and terror he knows he should feel. It's all passed away, all dampened, all subdued by the strange and consuming calm. But I will not obey you. What? Her eyes narrow, her lips near. What are you? At that, he sparks, feels his calm snapped, unleashing an infernal rage that he lets simmer for too long, consuming, burning through him with a heat and a roar, a beast he's kept locked away his entire life. His feet dig into the earth, cracking against frost that's formed on the grass. His dagger goes to his side as he charges forward, swinging it wide, up, closing the distance and bringing it down. She throws up her hands, and the shimmering barrier crackles to life before her. Keith, dagger catches on it, digs deep, but he stops in his tracks. He stares at her, eyes wild, flames licking up his arms, blood burning as he presses his dagger into her shield. He watches as the cracks splinter along it like ice. I am born, he hisses, feral and deep. He relishes her grasp, watches the shock flicker across her face, watches it turn to rage and frustration. As she throws out her hands, shattering her shield, Keith's already on the move. He throws himself back, tearing his dagger from her barrier and putting distance between them. His arms go up to shield his face, but the shards of ice melt before they can touch him, droplets sizzling against his skin. Her scream is feral, furious, arms thrown out and dark lightning striking out from the gathering storm, hitting her and cracking along her arm to the clawed fingers she points at Keith. He dives out of the way as it strikes the ground where he has stood, setting dirt and grass flying, splintering stone. She barely gives him time before she's shooting off another bolt, and another, a flurry of eyes and lightning. The wind whips hard and fast, and his hair stings against his cheeks. He has to keep moving, can't stay still for a moment, but he's used to this. He's trained for this. Shiro has always pushed and pushed and pushed him, so when his lungs are burning and his limbs ache, when the queen manages to strike him, and pain blooms searing and cold enough to burn, he keeps going. Because he has to, because he knows how, because if he stops, he'll die, and for once, he has so much to live for, because he's not just fighting for himself, but for those he loves. Outside the swirling wall of wind and fog, he can see figures moving, the tall, shadow-like forms of Queen's servants, the lithe and strong forms of Fae in bodysuits and armor. They clash, they duel, but he can only catch glimpses. His focus is on the Queen, and hers is on him, within the eye of the blizzard. But he can feel his strength waning. He can feel his body growing heavy and sluggish, slowly but surely. He barely has time to gather his balance before he's dodging again. She brings ice up from the earth, jagged spikes that aim to skewer him from below. She calls lightning down upon him. Always moving, always running. Fire, burning, hot enough to keep the ice and sleet at bay to get him going. But it's little more than a shield. He's never learned how to use it more than that. And he can't get close enough to use his weapon whenever he manages it, even for a brief moment. She throws up a barrier, catching his blade and forcing him to retreat before she can strike. She always knows where he is, always knows where to block, always knows. Which is why he needs the element's surprise. He throws himself back as black lightning cracks against the earth. He rolls, skids, and shifts back to his feet, crouched low, putting his free hand to his lips. He whistles. Once, loud, sharp, clipped. A new crackle, like static. A plume of dark blue smoke bursting to light at his side. And a large wolf's body, warm, soft, leaning into him, sturdy and solid. Out of the corner of his eye, he can see the electric blue markings shimmering across Cosmo's fur, bleeding through his blood magic. Hey boy, Keith drapes his free arm around Cosmo's back, fingers digging into his fur. He can feel Cosmo's inherent magic reach out to him, the remnants of his own tingling against his fingertips. I was hoping you hadn't gone far. The Queen reaches out. The Queen reaches out, hands clawed and fingers curled. Let's go. He feels their minds connect. The familiar brush of someone beyond himself. A Cosmo reaching for him, searching his thoughts for a will, a place, somewhere to jump. The feeling is familiar. The darkness, feeling light and formless, momentarily shifting, stomach dropping, cold, twisted, dizzy, and it all comes rushing back, becomes solid. He's used to blinking with Cosmo enough that the dizziness fades quickly. There is a moment of weightlessness before they're falling. From high above the stone circle, he can see the circular funnel of the white gust as he falls towards it. He can see the darker shadows and figures coming together and clashing on the hill beyond. The wind whips at his body, at his clothes, at his hair, but gravity's grip is strong. It drags him down, down, down. He and Cosmo drop in free fall. He holds his dagger high above his head, angling his body, ready to strike. Flames dance down his arms, swirling and igniting along his blade. His teeth are bared. A shout rips from his throat, primal and raw and full of his fury. The Queen watches him fall, and the time seems to slow. He sees her standing there, watches her hood fall back, watches her long white hair tangle in the wind, watches how her robes whip in the gusts below and around her, sees the way her eyes glow, smoking, body crackling with power as she reaches up, points at him. Lightning surges. He grabs Cosmo, displacement and stomach churning, body dizzy and weightless, solid. As soon as he feels the ground beneath his feet, falling to crouch, he strikes, trusting himself, trusting Cosmo to take him where he wanted to be. He stands quickly, both hands on his dagger handle, thrusting his arms out, and sinking his blade into Queen's back. He feels the impact, feels her sharp intake of breath, feels her stumble step, and they both freeze. The air around them stills, the storm going quiet in the space between seconds, the snow and sleet weightless, the fog a white wall around them, held in a strange sort of pause. Their clothes, their hair, it hovers as the wind stops, as time seems to slow. Keith's magic surges through him, a force he's never known, bursting from his chest, from his core, and rolling through his veins like a tidal wave, until it hits his hands, his dagger, and his dagger glows. it lengthens. The blade shoots out, forming a longer curved sword, and shoving straight through the queen's chest, licked with flames that hiss and sizzle as it burns away her icy flesh. He doesn't know how long they stay like that, locked in time and frozen in space. He isn't sure how the moment ends. 1 second, they're both still. In the next, they're both falling. His blade turns to smoke, absorbing back to his palm and settling beneath his skin. But while he's used to the prickle and burn, it's nothing compared to this, to how it rips and cuts, tearing at his arm from the inside. He falls to his knees, hissing in pain with his fists clenched, and as his other hand presses to his forearm, teeth gritted against the ache that throbs bone deep. And a second later, the queen's body falls, limp and lifeless, shattering like ice as she hits the ground. He stares and stares and stares. His arm hurts, his chest aches, his lungs sting, his blood burns. He feels drained beyond belief, exhausted in a way he's never known, fit to collapse at any moment. And still he stares, disbelieving, because it doesn't feel real. It feels like she could get up at any moment. It's not like it's over yet, because it's never over. It's never... Keith! The voice sounds very far away, an echo, but then it's closer, sharper. Keith! Woman's voice, a figure dropping to her knees at Keith's side. One hand on his back and the other at his arm. The pain begins to fade, and he lets out a shaky breath, turning to find Corellia crouched next to him, face severe and eyes searching. Worried. Come, she says, pulling him to his feet. He stumbles, but she catches him, pulls his arm around her shoulder to support him. We have to go. Now! And they're running, sprinting, fleeing, out of the stone circle, down the hill, into the forest, away from the body of the fallen Winter Queen. Oh boy, guys, this is the longest one that I ever pulled out. But hey, saw that little bit of moment that King Lance trying to trick to the Winter Queen that Keith has to kill Lance. But nope, Cosmo has to save him and takes Lance with him, and they're visible. And now, Keith reveals himself to her. Keith is an Ironblood. While everybody else, they don't know that he's an Ironblood. Anybody in the guys know? Keith killed the Winter Queen. So, no queen. That means, Lothar, you're kind of useless, sort of. Without his mother, he would be useless. He has to find another way to put it all together. But this is really, really nice episode. Not episode. This is the nice chapter. I am very excited right now that we're gonna have a few chapters away. We have a couple of chapters left before we're done with this fic. Alright, well, hope you enjoy this one. And I'll see you in the next chapter of Love Me Twice, Save Me Thrice. Okay, goodbye everyone.